You have a strange accent.
Yeah.
Where is this from?
Oh, Hackney.
Right. The Hackney of Canada?
I'm from Toronto,
right.
but I did go to Hackney Town Hall and put my hand over my heart and sing God Save the Queen. And the Speaker of Hackney Council came out and with her mace in a frock coat and told me and everyone else who became a citizen that day that we were now living in a democracy wherever we'd come from, and we had a duty to be engaged in civic life. So I thanked her for saving me from my long Canadian totalitarian nightmare, and ever since I've been meddling in affairs of state. I have a beautiful keyboard that Datamancer made before he died, that is made out of, by deconstructing a USB keyboard that was so cheap it was effectively free, and then building it in this beautiful metal and brass housing. But the reason that machine was the keyboard was so cheap it was effectively free is that, first of all, the company that made it externalized all the devastating environmental costs of its production to the rest of us. And second of all, they made it by chaining children to machines, right? I mean, all of our super abundant, post-singularity, effectively free technology is just swimming in oceans of blood, right? But we can pretend that it just sort of parachuted down out of the sky.
I love that,
yeah.
Especially the arrival of the Apple Watch. This kind of this horrible reminder that we are unfortunately polluting ourselves and the world. And
yeah, it would be. I mean, I would love it if. One of the most tragic steampunk artifacts there is the beautifully tooled USB stick, right? Because here is a thing that is like, it's not. There's no speculation about when this will be obsolete. Like, have you ever gone through a bag and found like a 16 megabyte USB stick and thought, like, this is not just a liability, it's a terrible liability, right? Now imagine taking that liability and embedding it in something that isn't just a few dozen labor hour inputs from someone being underpaid in the Pacific Rim, but in fact is like hundreds of hours of blood, sweat, and tears and great thoughtfulness that goes into this thing that is now just a complete, a bit of landfill. And that is, this massive liability that's even harder to throw away than that little plastic gubbins. And so we're pretty bad at privacy. And knowing which disclosure is going to come up and bite you in the ass is really hard. And so a general precautionary principle is a good idea. It's hard to be private all the time, and making choices to share your information with other people can also get you into trouble. But sharing your information without ever making a conscious choice or getting into an unconscious habit of sharing very widely without regard to the character of the information is really hard. There's this corrosive narrative about digital natives, which, in addition to being incredibly problematic, speaking as an immigrant who's the child of illegal immigrant refugees, to talk about who's a native and who isn't, awful thing, is that kids, if they're digital natives, then everything they do on the internet must be right, because they have this mystical knowledge about the internet by dint of being born after the millennium. They have a mystical knowledge of how the internet is supposed to be used. It's like there was a king who supposedly raised a bunch of children in the woods without human contact to find out what the deep language was. It turns out that it's like grunts, clicks, and trauma. But we think that because kids were raised without the corrupting influence of not having the internet, they know what the internet is for. And there's an alternate explanation for why kids share way too much information on the internet, which is that they're adolescents who are making mistakes, right? And it's a much kinder hypothesis to kids to believe that they're adolescents who are making mistakes, because it implies that when kids do things that are facially stupid, rather than kind of exalting them for having uncovered some deep, mystic, irrational, and impossible to understand wisdom about the internet, instead, we try to find systems that have forgiveness built into them to make up for the fact that we didn't somehow produce, with the turn of the millennium, a generation that is immune to making mistakes, but instead produced a generation with the same propensity for mistakes that we had. And wouldn't it be nice if those mistakes didn't haunt them for the rest of their days?
I'm actually going to call time, because I can't really think of how better to end.
Very good.
When I grow up, I wish to be as smart and as erudite as you are.
Very nice of you. Thank you very much.
Please join me in welcoming Cory. Thank you so much.